So Volker, thank you very much for joining us on stage, and Dirk as well as a support. I will let you now make your presentation. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for having us here. Yeah, and thank you for offering the opportunity to present our latest efforts to provide you a certification memorandum. Here, the title is called Flight Test for Demonstrators and Related Safety Substantiations. And in practice, that means we are working on a certification memorandum that we will send out for public consultation in a couple of weeks from now, on which we will provide you during this presentation shortly the outlines of that cert memo, the CM content elements in a bit more detail, and the related EASA steps in the evaluation at the higher level, so to give you a flavor of what we intend to do there. Going into that objective part of the draft cert memo, on one hand, it's to enable an early flight testing of developmental aircraft, including those that comprise and include novel technology, to ease the way forward. It's also to provide guidance on the necessary substantiations that we expect to see, related justifications and also objectives that you should follow up on when describing the flight conditions. We try to clarify further the responsibilities and the liabilities of the applicant so that you are providing yourselves a better picture when submitting the information, and also to be prepared in the substantiation efforts. We are revising the process from what we currently follow up in many of the activities where we use the mitigation of non-compliances approach. So usually when you go for an STC, you have areas which are being changed. You have certain non-compliances for that period until it's substantiated. You describe how you mitigate those non-compliances until things are ready. Now, this is less favorable when you deal with a small aircraft, fully new technology, for example, or a new applicant. So instead, you should describe how you substantiate for the targeted objectives, and I'll come to that later. The CM is focusing and clearly limited to development flights of small aircraft by a company. So we are not dealing with home-built aircraft. We are not looking at certification activities. It's for a limited number of flight hours. It's for a limited number of flights. And we want to focus our EASA team involvement. We cannot support in terms of a full consultation of new applicants. We really need to buy into your own capacities and competences. With that in mind, the further outlines of the CM are to describe in more detail the safety objectives of the flight conditions that shall be met. So we are describing the philosophy that you shall follow and to be kept in mind when establishing all the activities. As said before, we want to clarify some company responsibles and the adequate staff selection that you should aim for when going for flight condition approvals for these kind of activities. We are summarizing the company provisions that we expect to see, considering that we are approving flight conditions under Part 21. Also, the flight condition requirements already contain a certain subset of Part 21 provisions and references that you need to implement in order to be able to provide satisfactory information. So that's where we deal with organizational matters, procedures, and the like things to enable the overall activity. Last not least, and most importantly actually, to describe the hazard identification and the need for the risk reduction. We're coming up with a flight test risk matrix that you need to assess yourself for your aircraft design at a global level and to lead to certain risk reductions to end up in an acceptable domain. As said before, we're aiming at the small aircraft domain, so which means for now we're looking into level 1, level 2, CS23, respectively class 1 and 2, Part 27, CS27 rotorcraft, special condition VTOL, and special condition light UAS. We are limiting it to developmental flights. Again, the level of substantiation that is necessary to go for certification will require much more effort. Therefore, right now, it's all contained for these developmental activities. When an organization applies that still has not yet received the DOA approval, or respectively is in the path to extend its domains, we will have we will need to have certain competences in the company to sign appropriately the Form 18B, which declares that the conditions and restrictions are suitable for a basic safe flight. We retain the right to ask for these evidences and to actually accept the evidences, or respectively to reject the, or will not accept the person to sign the declaration. Mentioned before was the flight test risk analysis that you should establish there, with also related mitigations and justifications. Eventually, we'd like to receive from you as a company a summary of the catastrophic and hazardous conditions and how far they're mitigated. And here we are not talking only about those which are system related, but at a more global level of the respective flight test activities. Eventually, you will have company flight test pilots, flight test engineers that are on board of the aircraft, and they should be informed about the remaining risks that cannot be fully mitigated and where there inherently are some life-risking elements, and they need to consent with it. Regarding the details, as mentioned before, we look into elements like the design aspects. How do you release a design? How do you verify certain design elements? To have a configuration control established, to have flight test staffing with appropriate competences and experience, to have certain elements regarding the flight test organization. For the flight test program, you should also perform the hazard identification and risk assessments for the different flight test activities and the aircraft configurations. From that, we are requesting to identify appropriate risk mitigations and risk reductions to an acceptable level. As said before, we are in developmental phases. We cannot assume a zero risk. So how do you deal with the remaining ones? From the EASA side, we don't have a predefined LOI. So we will pick what we intend, or what we deem relevant for the investigation. As a more graphical way to display things, you will first have your test aircraft configuration. You will have a design of that configuration, and you may end up in a slightly different manufactured aircraft. You need to assess those and their differences. You will have a test envelope against which you want, or in which you want to test your aircraft. Temperatures, altitudes, wind conditions, etc. And eventually you also have a test plan. So what are you going to test? What do you want to demonstrate? What do you want to achieve for yourselves? And now you need to put all these three major pillars into their context and assess them in an iterative process. You will end up in the need for justifications, and these may then comprise elements like the system descriptions, calculations, testing, etc. All that, in a summary, should bring you more or less automatically to that flight test risk analysis summary. And here, from the EASA standpoint, we'd like only to see the catastrophic and hazardous parts. You will probably have many more than those. From there, you will derive certain mitigations and probably de-risking, therefore declassifying these elements from catastrophic and hazardous to lower levels, and you will have justifications for those. With that, you more or less have everything together, which is necessary for the submittal of the Form 18B, which is then the aircraft configuration, the final one that you'd like to get the approval for, the set of substantiations to have all the mitigations in place, which also then automatically drives you to the set of conditions and restrictions under which the flights can take place. In terms of what we are seeing there eventually is that we can disagree with the substantiations. We can also refuse the approval. We will check, but the extent of the checking can vary. We're not having a predefined set, as mentioned before. The major aspect and major philosophy is no risk to third parties, and the risk for the people on board mitigated as much as possible, reasonably possible. And eventually, for those remaining risks, having the crew consented with that risk and recorded. Also, to reinforce the message to you as applicants, the responsibility in the first place is with you. Not just by our blessing through issuance of an approval, everything is being good. The responsibility is with the organization applying. In our own evaluation, we will receive the application, we will have first assessments, we will assign a project certification manager, who will then also have a first say on the team selection and the team involvement. We will perform an eligibility check for the application. We will have possibly also a parallel DOA investigation, and there may be a check then with the DOA team leader for the respective company to see what is the status of certain procedures that may be relevant for the process. We will identify the key aspects that are necessary to be verified or which are suitable for verification in order to ensure what I mentioned before as the philosophy to be followed. And we may request additional testing or substantiations in order to underline and support the claims. Eventually, we hopefully end up in an approval, but if things are not in the good way, we may reject, respectively not approve the flight conditions. And that's how we come or not to flight condition approvals. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We will show you the Slido. So we can see the first question, which is asking why this CM is limited to certain small aircraft. Indeed, certain large aircraft manufacturers have started development programs that might also benefit from this substantiate for the targeted objective philosophy. Okay.
So we try to explore first on the smaller size before we would do steps in other directions. Right now, we limit it on purpose to that small aircraft domain where it's more contained, where we have better visibility of what is happening and whether the measures taken are in the good direction. If we further extend it, I think it's also a matter of further exploration and the success, hopefully success of the approach can be claimed. But for now, we think that we should keep the existing processes, in particular for the large airplanes, considering that in particular the third-party risk is more difficult to establish.
As you can see, we have some time left. So according to how much time is left, we take more or less questions. So next question is, where is the explicit distinction made between development and certification flights?
Well, the degree of substantiation that you need to establish in order to enter into certification flights will be much higher. You need to have an aircraft which is close to the final design in order to claim that these flights are being suitable for the compliance demonstration. It would also include that you have different air crews on board and you may have EASA crews on board. And all these are actually excluded when we look at pure developmental flights for the purpose of demonstrators, proof of concepts, and the like domains. I hope that clarifies.
Okay, looking at the clock. By following the new cert memo and by incorporating its guidance material in our DOH procedure, would that support the EASA acceptance of a DOA privilege to issue permit to fly in accordance with, well, the regulation requirements which are referenced on the screen and the FCA?
I think it's very fair to say that especially the privilege on flight condition approval is very much related to the demonstrated competence. So just having a procedure alone does not help. Of course, you need to have appropriate procedures. This one is mainly focused on the development flights. You also need to cover the certification flight. We need to see how you manage that. And then you have to demonstrate voters that you understand that you're competent, that you can properly assess. And that's the point in time where we would agree on issuing the privilege to approve flight conditions. Sounds harder than it is. Many have achieved that, but these are the core issues. And for the permit to fly, you have to make sure that you assess the conformity of the aircraft before you then issue a permit to fly under privilege, which would be then 263 C7, not 711B. Hope it answers the question sufficiently.
Okay, we will take another question and then we'll go over to the next presentation. So this question is about the role of the CVE in the frame of the flight conditions approval.
Yeah, twofold. When we talk about privilege, it's mandatory that there is an independent checking of the substantiation that are provided for flight conditions. For the cases we discussed in, or will discuss in the CM, we would say propose or we ask you to at least establish a 4 eyes principle, just to get an additional level of, let's say, satisfaction on your side that what you provide is acceptable to us. This could then reduce the time it takes us to review, because we don't want to identify all the little pieces and mistakes that have been made. We hope that you can identify them before and work on it, and when what we receive is then mature enough to be assessed. But here it's really just a strong recommendation. There is nothing in the rule that would really require 4 eyes principle. For the privilege, we require it. No way.